For March 13th. Tomorrow's the wellness meeting. There's no revenue. Yeah, I think that's the big one. Well, March 13th, special presentation of safety and security.
I wasn't there.
Nothing on the agenda for.
My kids weren't big readers. Okay. Oh, that's good. It was fun, but like, and so I mean, I was always there doing yearbook, but I was like,
That's what I thought it was.
and I was like, if you're everybody, well, I nobody never saw it until it was, yeah. You're like,
Yeah, sure did.
My Wi-Fi's bad.
probably why, yes.
I didn't even sign on yet.
Yeah. Oh, Evan's going.
Sign on here.
It makes you
Oh, yeah, yeah. Seriously. Oh, yes. I don't know. Oh, wait. Yes, I did. It's so sweet. I'm like, Evan, you get that. That happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, like here. Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, I remember that trip. I don't know.
All right, good evening. I'm going to call this March 6, 2023 work session to order. I ask for a roll call, please.
Dr. Campley? Mr. Dorr?
Here.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Mr. Fountain?
Here.
Mr. Keenan?
Here.
Dr. Kohler?
Here.
Mrs. Mayers?
Here.
Mr. Saylor?
Here.
Ms. White?
Hold on one second, please. Dr. Campley's going to be on Zoom. With that, since we have a board member on Zoom, I'm going to suspend policy 05.6, where we have to do a roll call vote when a board member's on Zoom.
No, but that's cool. Show me your camera. Yes. Yours. Okay. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Excuse me, 006.1. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 1.04, approval of the agenda. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I have a second. I have an amendment to the motion. I move to add section 9.03, move to add to first read policy 1.09.1, and section 9.04, move to add to first read policy 1.09.2. Is there a second? Second. I have a second. Don, if you could pass these down. Dr. Russell, if you could pass these down. Not 1.0.9, 109.1, age-appropriate standards applicable to policy 108 textbooks and policy 109 resource sources, and 1.09.2 library resource materials. As school board directors, we are tasked with the creation of an environment that fosters learning for all students and the advancement of policies that achieve this goal through tolerance, inclusion, and equity. The purpose of 109.1 and 109.2 is to make sure that we live up to those standards we hold so dear and create a professional, ethical, and age-appropriate building for all of our students. Our libraries should reach all learners in our building and tell stories that educate our students and connect to the lives that they are living. Currently, we are not living up to those standards. In an attempt to create a more inclusive environment, we have opened the door to creating a more X-rated environment. We can be inclusive without being X-rated. Recently, the vice president of North Penn School Board wrote an op-ed about All Boys Aren't Blue. In this article, he wrote that asking for a review of this book was designed to disenfranchise students, particularly those that identify as members of the LGBTQIA+ community. He stated, from pressure from organizations like Moms for Liberty were the reason behind this, and in all due respect, I cannot disagree more with those statements. I personally asked All Boys Aren't Blue to be reviewed, and during the review process, I was told in part, due to our mission statement, this book was added. I have a very diverse family tree. In my family tree, we are Jewish, Catholic, Christian, and Muslim. We are heterosexual and homosexual, and we are peoples of many colors. To be accused of being anti-LGBTQIA+ because you disagree with a book, to me, is political buffoonery at its finest. We should be providing recourse to all of our students without eclipsing the barrier of suitable nature for our students. This is not a scenario of Pico versus Islandry. This is not a question of books to remove due to being anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, as we have plenty of those books here. This is about suitable words and stories that minor children are reading. What a student does outside the school building in the walls is between the student and the parent. What happens in the walls is between the board and the policies that we create. We want to be able to provide suitable books for all of our students without crossing the barrier of being sexually explicit. I ask for your support to add these to the agendas to these motions and open up the floor for discussion.
Why would this not be part of policy committee? You're taking it upon yourself to make this decision without going through the appropriate channels that we have set up as a board.
I don't have the right just to add something to policy myself. So the proper channels would be to make a motion and add it to the agenda. We could after, if it passes, we could defer it to policy after first read or for first read, but I don't have the right just to add something to policy.
First of all, you have added things to policy because 109 is your ad in the first place. Second, the job of policy is to change policies as needed. So this would be a discussion that would happen at policy committee. Dr. Russell is shaking her head, so that is specifically how, I mean, like, you have taken your role beyond appropriate to come to a board meeting without having reached out to any board member to make us aware that you want to take this power step for something because you've submitted book challenges and they haven't gone your way. So now you're just going to change policy because you're not happy with the way that things are set up.
No,
and that's not how this works.
You specifically stated at the policy meeting that this belongs to the full board, not the policy committee. I'm taking your counsel. Any discussions? Other discussions?
Yeah, so based on that, why wasn't this sent to us in an email saying you'd like to discuss these policies? Like, this was just thrown at us, these pages that I'm trying to read through and understand on the fly. Like, this just seems really inappropriate and out of order. And I agree that we should be discussing this either in the memo or in policy committee or somewhere, not just throwing it as an add to the agenda.
Other discussions?
Yeah, I want to chime in. Am I able to speak now?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, this is 100% sneaky business, the way that this is being handled. You don't come up to a board meeting, just like we're expected to give administration full warning and questions if we're able to give them ahead of time. We're supposed to email them out of courtesy ahead of time. The fact that you come in here and you have pages of documents, which, by the way, clearly you had to take time to get together. You knew I wasn't going to be at the meeting. You didn't bother to send it to me. This is a sneak attack. I feel it's completely non-transparent. I feel like it's 100% your political agenda, and it needs to be put to the side and not handled tonight. This is something to be discussed outside of this meeting.
Other discussions?
So we're asking, or what you're asking, is that it be added to the agenda so that it can be discussed.
Correct. Add it to the agenda so it could sit 1 week, so it can be voted on next week.
Yeah, there's no way that we're going to talk about voting and doing any type of policy change on something that you're throwing at us in the 11th hour. No possible way that that is ethical or should even be considered.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Saylor, I'm wondering why we're not following the process and bringing the policies to policy committee. This is typically, and honestly, Mrs. Smith and I, administration, are happy to look at these in greater detail and consider what might make the most sense. I recognize there are concerns with some of the content in our books, and in fact thought that we were taking steps forward after the most recent policy committee meeting. We're preparing to work on the admin regs so that we can invite parents to let us know when they have concerns. We're looking for more comprehensive descriptions. We are well aware of the concerns. Our selection process there's been a layer added to that. Are you suggesting that the board vote next week to implement these policies, or that they go to first reading? I think I heard both things.
First read, which means the policy committee can look at it in their policy meeting.
They can, but that's not typically the order of events. Typically, the policy committee discusses the policy and reviews it, and then, if supported, it moves to first reading. If it needs more work, it continues in policy committee until those discussions are teased out and the policy gets to where the committee representatives and the committee believe it's ready for the board to review. I'm just not sure why the shortcut.
I think.
Can I ask which board members saw this prior to tonight? So again, you're taking power as one board member to try to push something through for your agenda. It's completely inappropriate.
I would really like the opportunity to work with individuals on the board who are raising questions about some of the content in our books. We would like to work with you on that and the language that will support upholding the values in the district while still affording our students access to what's in the library. Also giving parents the opportunity to express their views as well if they don't want their children to read certain books, or it's okay. We can work together on this. It should go through policy committee though.
So apparently it was overlooked, and now the library is running wild with bringing in obscene literature. That there is no limit whatsoever to what the librarians or other people can bring and introduce into these libraries. There just isn't. The fact is that we thought that it was common sense that you don't put porn in libraries in schools
This is
and
your
give them
opinion.
and please and you give these materials to minors. You, in the name of inclusivity or in whatever name you want, you can introduce any book, any magazine, any pictorial, any internet to these kids that you want. There is no limit. You cannot restrict age inappropriate behavior anymore because there is no limit. And there is no regulation of it, and there is nothing in our policies that restricts age inappropriate or sexualized materials from our children, from the youngest to the youngest of our children. And that is wrong. Your school is not doing its job, and your policies are not sufficient to protect our children from this material. Not talking about what gender or what preference, we are talking about pornography that we are delivering to our students in the name of progress, and that is wrong.
This is 100% a sneak attack. This was clearly planned ahead of time. You are all overstepping your role of school board members to the fullest extent possible that you could do. I am absolutely 100% disgusted in the behavior in the which that you're doing this stuff. This is uncalled for. It is 100% unethical, and somebody needs to put a stop to it. This is not what we do. This is not the purpose of a board. You need to back down.
Thank you, Dr. Campley. Is there any other discussion?
So I just want to, if I could, Mr. Keenan, I don't know that the content in libraries, if I understand comments from Mr. Subers in the past, qualify or fall under pornography. I absolutely recognize that some of the information that's been presented to us and raised questions is sexually explicit. I understand that. However, in some cases, it is one small portion of a book. It is not part of the bigger picture. Libraries fall under different rules. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't put accommodations in place to support individuals who aren't in agreement with some of these books that have been raised and brought to our attention because they do have sexually explicit content or content that individuals are really uncomfortable with. I can appreciate that, absolutely. And I want to support parents. But there isn't pornography in the books. There is sexually explicit content. I don't believe it can be characterized or would be characterized as pornography. And we have a way, we've come up with a remedy, a way to work with parents so that if they choose, they can inform us they don't want their kids signing out those books. And I also want to add, because I feel like I need to have a shout out here for librarians, nobody is intentionally setting students up to be exposed to something that they shouldn't be exposed to. We have learned that some of these descriptions don't always tell us some of the details we've discovered are part of these books. They're working diligently to make the best decisions for our students. They are not trying to upset the board or any portion of our parent community.
Is there anything that prevents pornography in the library? And the library, one other just respectful disagreement in all of those statements, although there are a couple disagreements, but the library does not fall under separate rules. It falls under our rules. We are in charge of this library. We are in charge of the books that are presented to these children.
And I struggle with this. I mean, the struggle for me is we have go to policy. I, as a board member, can't participate in policy, so, which is fine. However it gets resolved whenever it comes back. But I think the bigger question is, what do we as a school district value? What are we feeling comfortable sharing with our minor students? And so I appreciate that we are putting a vehicle in place so that parents can say, I don't want my student to read that book, but some of the excerpts that I've read from the books, it's a how-to manual, pretty much, on, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I don't see how that's upholding our mission statement and how we don't have a higher standard for us as a district.
So I think the key thing that you said is you've read excerpts. You haven't read the books in their entirety. And they are minor portions of these books. We have committees that have been put together to review these books. So what you're saying is you don't trust these teachers, these administrators who have reviewed these books. You're saying you don't trust our staff. That is what you're saying tonight. Mr. Saylor is saying he submitted challenges. He doesn't like the result that he got back, so he wants to change policy.
I'm 1 for 1. So you're saying like I like have a lot of challenges that I've lost.
You put in Fun Home and that
It got
was
what?
approved.
No, it wasn't. It hasn't been returned back to me unless they gave it to you first. I don't know the answer. I have 7 books out. I've only had 2 returns. I'm 1 for 1. I'm pretty good. If Fun Home comes back, in all due respect, if Fun Home comes back and they say the book's suitable, that's a big problem for me. Having a picture of 2 young students having oral sex in the school library is not artistic to me. It has no educational value.
Okay, so why do you care if my kid reads it?
You can go to the library and get it.
No.
You go to the library and get it.
Why do you care if my kid reads it?
Excuse me. This is a conversation between the board.
So we're all about parent rights here, right? As parents, we know what is best for our kids. So why do you care if my kid reads that? If you don't want your kid to read it, then put it out there that they can't read it.
I don't care what your kid does. It's just like you don't care what my kid does. But I care what's in these walls because this is a school.
But
this
you're
is an
saying
education
you do
center.
care what my kid does
No.
because you're trying to say he can't read these books that are completely appropriate for him to read.
This is an education center. A student shouldn't pick up a book willy-nilly and find out how to have anal sex and put lube on a condom and then say the condom tastes like cotton candy. That was interesting to me. A student shouldn't pick up a book, okay, and see pictures of a kid in a shower getting a blowjob from his girlfriend. That shouldn't happen in these walls, in my opinion. It's my opinion. They shouldn't happen. And for 2+ years, I've tried off the board as a citizen and on the board to figure out how the books are coming into the school district and why in an education center we would want a picture book that has a picture of two people having oral sex, having 69. Why we would have a picture of a kid in another picture book that has a kid getting a blowjob and his girlfriend snuck into and had a blowjob and the taste of what the semen tastes as it goes down their throat. That's not acceptable in these walls, in my opinion, especially for a 12-year-old, a middle school book.
Okay, so again,
Dr. Campley, raise your hand and wait your turn.
No, in these books that you're trying to come in here and slam us with this policy that you know for sure, I know you shared with other people, you just didn't share with particular board members, I'm sure was one of them because I didn't get anything. And these books that you're complaining about, there is a process, as Mrs. Evans-Brockett said. And if it comes back that the book is okay, feel free to go and ask them to put a block on it so your kid can't check it out. But I guarantee you, every single time that you draw attention to these books, these kids that you don't want to have this information, everything you just said right now, there's minors watching this board meeting. There's minors that heard every sexually explicit thing that just came out of your mouth. They heard it. And you know what they're going to do? They're not going to go to the library to get it because they don't need to. They can go ahead and they can Google 69 on their phones and find out what it means because you just put it in their mouths. So you know what, Mr. Saylor? Maybe you need to realize there's a whole bigger world out there than just the school library. These kids can get anything, anywhere at this point. So us putting a stop in the school library, the only thing that does is draw attention to the fact that these kids now want to read it more than ever. Instead of reading it in an educational setting where if they have questions, they can ask those questions and figure out what is right or wrong. And another thing that was said is a lot of times it's these excerpts and you're not reading the big story. And usually there's a larger message to the story that actually goes along with why those things are being discussed. We have 18-year-olds going off to universities that are expecting these kids to have read some of these books that you want off the shelves. So I think you need to learn where your place is in the educational pecking field and get back in line.
Thank you, Dr. Campley. Any other Dr. Kolar?
So clearly this is a bigger discussion than I think we should be having at this moment. I don't know if there's a motion on the floor, I'm confused, but can we move that this discussion be moved to policy and then come back to the board at another time?
There's a motion on the floor to add it to the agenda.
So do we have to vote on that, or can I amend the motion to put it to policy?
No, I wouldn't accept that motion, and as the amender, I would have to accept it.
This was very obvious that he did this on purpose in order, because he knows all the ways in and out to get things the way he wants them.
I'm sorry, I know how to do my job.
All the time.
Is your job plagiarism from Central Bucks? Protecting the people of the township. From Central Bucks, word for word, the agenda?
Are there any other discussions?
He already did it once for when the kids graduated, so I'm sure it's not put it past him to do it again.
Are there any other discussions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call.
Mr. Saylor, if I
Yeah.
could ask for Ms. Widener's benefit, could you review the motion, the actual motion? And before you do that, I just want to ask once more, I would echo Dr. Kolar's request and wonder if we could take this to policy committee before the board moves to, if I understand correctly, is it implement the policy or move it to first reading?
Move it to first read, which means the policy committee can talk about it at their meeting if it passes.
And then pull it back?
Can we just move it to policy now?
There's nothing preventing, there's nothing preventing the policy committee from looking at the motion. Excuse me, looking at the policy.
Typically, though, once it gets to first read, well, okay, it can go back to policy, and then if that's the way the vote goes, then that's what I would hope we could do. That the policy committee has an opportunity to have discussion about the proposed policies.
But just to clarify, he stated earlier that he wants us to vote on this next week, which would then put this in place. So this is not about coming back to policy. He is trying to manipulate the correct procedure in order to put this in place without it going through policy.
So I would ask you to clarify. I think I just heard the motion that you want to put on the motion you have on the floor, and
Motion
for Ms.
to move
Widener's.
to add 9.03, move to add to first read policy 109.1, 9.04, move to add to first read policy 109.2.
So you're moving them to first reading.
Correct. Which means the first read wouldn't happen until April, which means the policy committee, which meets in March, can look at it and make suggestions if they wanted to.
I think it would be on first reading this month, actually.
Can you
Is that correct?
clarify what you meant then when you said vote next week? Because you did say something about voting next week.
Yeah, you would have to vote to approve to move it forward to first read.
Yeah. And again, I don't know that needs.
Is it a first reading that, are you putting it on the agenda to be a first reading?
To add to first read, so which means it wouldn't happen until April.
That's not what it, typically, you present policies for a first reading, and then the following month you have a second reading. So is it?
This is to add to first read.
Why I'm trying to suggest that we move it to policy meeting, but he's fighting that so he can push this through.
So you want to move it to first reading?
Correct.
So it's going to be in policy, first reading, second reading. We wouldn't vote on this for 3 months?
Correct.
So it will get to policy committee, it sounds. I'm a little confused, I gotta be honest.
Yeah, we don't vote on first reads. We just have first reads after they've gone through policy committee. So this is not how our process works. So if he's adding it to the agenda for a vote, this is making it that we can vote next week to put this in place.
That's correct.
I got it.
Well, how about, how did the equity policy did the equity policy go to a first read from the board?
Through, it was.
Just got passed by the board and then sent to the policy for
No,
comment?
it was in policy committee first. This is different, that it's not going to policy committee first. This is different. There's no doubt about that. The policy.
I was confused. I read the minutes of that
there-
meeting. I
there's-
read the minutes of
yep.
that meeting, and
Yeah.
it didn't go to policy. It was a new policy, but they had talked about.
No, it was in policy first, factual. That's facts.
Okay.
It went to policy first, and then it went to first read. So this is
So it's really clear that this is a manipulation and that
Campley,
you're trying to sneak something through.
Dr. Campley, I understand. Let me, I got you. So
No, you don't got me. Sailor, you need to back down. You don't got me. I'll take care of myself. Thank you very much.
thank you, Dr. Campley. So, Mr. Doerr, this would add it to first read. There's nothing preventing the policy committee, there's nothing preventing the superintendent from asking and having that the policy committee review it as well.
Dr. Russell did just ask for that. She suggested that we follow what I suggested, but you're still pushing to add this to first reading, which I don't understand. That's not how we do these
Well, it
things.
either comes from the administration or from the board if we make a motion to send it to the policy. So all we have to, if we agree as a board, or a majority of us agree to send it, because the administration hasn't sent anything like this and doesn't want to send anything like this and doesn't think that those acts are pornography. So the board has to take some action, apparently a step, to send it to the policy committee.
Right,
And put it
which
in
is
front of
what
the
I
policy
suggested,
committee.
but that's not what
Because the
we're
administration's
voting on
not
right now.
going to.
I suggested we send this to policy, but that's not what the motion is right now.
Here's my concern with policy. I'll be very honest with you. You have 2 policy members that signed a petition that castigates Central Bucks and Penn Ridge and what they did. They stated in that petition that they signed, so 56 board members out of 4,000. I'll repeat it again. 56 board members out of 4,000 board members in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania signed a petition that stated that a policy like this and other similar policies would not be approved. You have other policy committee members that are pushing out the North Penn article that stated specifically that any conversation about a book similar to All Boys Aren't Blue is disenfranchising LGBTQ rights. So those policy members have already spoken by their actions. I brought this up to the full board as suggested that this is a full board action. There's nothing that would prevent the full board next week, which by the way is like a 30-minute meeting, to spend 2 or 3 hours going through this policy line by line by line and making amendments and making changes to it. There would be nothing preventing
problem
that.
is,
Dr.
you're
Campley,
not
I'm
allowing
going to
the
mute you
community-
now. And when you
No,
raise your hand,
you're not allowing
you'll...
the community to have a say in this.
Can you
You're
mute it,
trying to
please?
even bypass and speak
No,
for the
mute her.
community. You're not using the proper channels. The fact that this is not going to policy means that you're going ahead and bypassing even the community's right to speak.
Thank you. Dr. Campley, we muted you. I'll unmute you in a second. I'm sorry, Dr. Kohler. What did you ask me? I apologize.
I don't know. I still think that this should just not be something that
And
we
stop
vote on today
muting
to
me.
put on first
You have
reading.
no right to turn my.
I would like to see this just go to policy
Stop
committee. As Dr.
muting
Russell
me.
suggested.
You're not muted, Dr. Campley.
You have no
And-
right to do that.
You're not
None.
muted.
The
We
fact that
hear
you're
you loud
bringing
and
up
clear.
that 2
Leader Cole.
policy members signed the petition.
You just don't want the
that's 2
public
out
to
of
hear what
4.
I have to say, and the fact that you are going ahead and past the community and not allowing their voices to be heard on this subject by trying to sneak this in.
Anyway, I would
It
urge our
needs to
board
stop.
members to not vote to add this
Dr.
to first
Campley, you're
reading.
not muted, by the way. We heard all that. Go ahead, Dr. Kohler. I
Yeah,
apologize.
I know I'm not now, but I was, and I know you kept putting me on mute.
Go ahead, Dr. Kohler.
I would just like to urge everyone to follow the correct procedures and not vote to add this to the agenda tonight. This was thrown out of left field. None of us knew this was coming. I would like time to sit through and read this. I would like the community to weigh in on it, and I would like policy committee to discuss it.
Any other discussions?
So, in response, Mr. Keenan, to your comments, I did mention earlier, I am happy to read through these policies very carefully. Mrs. Smith and I can work together and see what parts of them might represent some of the conversations we've had and could be suggestions for policy committee to consider. We haven't had an opportunity to do that. This is the first we've been presented these, but we are happy to look at them and consider the salient points, the applicable points that we would recommend or bring up for conversation in policy committee. I am advocating for the opportunity to discuss in policy committee.
Any other discussions? Roll call.
Dr. Campley,
No.
Mr. Doerr,
No.
Mrs. Evans Brockett?
No.
Mr. Fountain? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Dr. Kohler?
No.
White is absent. Ms. Mears?
Yes, because I want to discuss it, but I'll be able to discuss it when it comes back.
Mr. Saylor?
Yes.
I have 4-4.
All right, looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second? No. It
Second.
failed. It failed. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Comments from on any topic? Anybody?
Good evening, everybody. Thought there might have been somebody else, that's why I didn't jump up. Wow. Yeah, wow. Transparency is something that is near and dear to my heart, and tonight seemed to be an end run around that. In the policy that was presented there is essentially word for word from Central Bucks. It seems like this board is now taking its orders from Central Bucks. It seems odd that if I look at Central Bucks, I can find out what's going to be happening here, and this is exactly what they do. The policies that is being presented is word for word from Central Bucks. We're not Central Bucks, we're Perkiomen Valley. We do things a little bit differently here. When we have a policy that we want to get passed, we have an open discussion with the community in a policy committee. Then all those minds can get together and decide whether or not it is wise to move on. We don't shove it down a board's throat to take a policy and do an end around. Moving a policy to first read before it goes to policy committee effectively takes the feet out from underneath the policy committee, because the first read is an action of the board, and the policy committee would have no right to overturn that in between the first and second reading. I'm sure Mr. Subers can elaborate on that to the board later. This is just a travesty. It's a joke. It's a sideshow, for lack of the better word to describe the type of show that this is. You're doing this for political reasons, and I don't like it at all. And I think the rest of the community is going to show this as well. I'm sorry, but this is not how we do things. This is not the normal order of business. This is a way to just get your own way and take the ball and go home. This is our home. This is not how we do things. We will stand behind people that look at things intelligently, that look beyond the shock value of a picture or a word. Because these things are so important to the education of our children. Not just my children, but yours. And please, I'm still speaking. I reserve my time.
Reservist time.
I'm sorry, but this is not supposed to be a debate between me and the audience. Anyway, I think my thoughts on this are clear, and I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here, and let's do things the right way, please.
Anyone else from the public?
Good evening. Wade Weston, Collegeville Borough. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am flabbergasted by what I'm seeing here tonight and the attempted end run around the established policies of this school district. Knowing the concerns that have been raised about following policies in the past and making sure that things are done according to the letter and the intent of the policy, I want to read to you from this district's policy 009 on policy development, and it talks about policy formulation, reading directly from the policy. A proposed policy may be submitted to the Board Policy Committee for consideration. The Policy Committee will determine the content and wording to be forwarded to the Board for action if appropriate. The proposed policy will be ready at the next regular meeting for discussion. Passage of the policy will be voted on at the subsequent board meeting. It doesn't make any provision for introducing a policy de novo at a board meeting for first reading to be voted on at a second reading at the subsequent board meeting. There's a process being described here. You follow your policy, you follow your process. You don't try to do an end around to get your way if you don't think, if you think, you know, you can't get your way by any other means. I'm shocked. You've spent nearly an hour of this meeting going over this, which is, you know, complete nonsense. You have actual work to do. You have items on your agenda that are important to the operation of this school district that need to be considered, and you've wasted almost an hour of your time on nonsense. This is not tolerable. This is disrespectful to your public, to your students, to your faculty, and to your administration. Get your act together.
Deviation from board, you forgot to read deviation from board policy. Situations may arise when the best interest of the students and or the Perkiomen Valley School District as a whole would not be served by the application of board policy. When possible, the situation will be brought to the board's attention for board action.
This is another violation of the order of the business. This is public comment time. You're not supposed to be responding to public comment.
There's nothing in policy that says you can't. Anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, we don't do that. That's, again, you taking and making your own rules for your own agenda. We do not respond. That's why people do not come to the podium, and we urge them not to ask questions because we cannot give answers during that time. So the fact that you're responding to Mr. Weston is breaking our traditional way in which we approach board meetings with public comment. So again, you're circumventing things in a way to make it work for you.
Hi, Betsy Stone, Skippack Township. I've been coming to board meetings for about 10 years, and that's why I know most of you, because I've talked to all of you at various times. And I have to say, I'm embarrassed. This is the first time in 10 years I am embarrassed. There are kids watching at home. There were kids in this room. And this is the way we behave. Worse than that, when somebody brought up about trusting our staff, there were people in this room saying we don't. I'm embarrassed for this board. I'm embarrassed for this community. I'm really just disgusted with all of you.
Any other comments? Okay. Reports and presentations. On March 13th, there will be a special presentation for safety and security. Student Liaisons report.
Hello, I got a slideshow, Dr. Russell. So I'll try to bring some smiles. Sorry, Arshia can't be here, and I got to cut out really quickly for a psychology project that I need to work on. But while we're here, let's have some fun. All right, so this is our girls basketball team. I'm not sure if you know, but we did win the district championship on Saturday. Yep. It is the first time in 7 years that we have the girls have won a district championship. They beat Haverford, and they go on in the state tournament. And I seriously think they can make a very deep state run. Along with them, the boys play Saturday at 5 o'clock in West Philadelphia High School against Roman Catholic, and the girls play Friday night against Red Lion in our gym. So congratulations to the girls and the cheerleaders, and the boys play. What did I say? Girls play Friday, boys play Saturday. There we go. So yeah, congratulations to the cheerleaders, the players, everybody who came out to Temple. It was a great atmosphere down there. Next slide. All right, some more Perk Valley history making. These are our 6 guys who made state wrestlings. They actually broke the school record. Our previous record was only sending 3 wrestlers to Hershey for states. That was 1975. So this was a long-standing record. So congratulations to Max Tansini, Carter Euchre, Gavin Pasco, Carson Pasco, Kelly Kakos, and Grant Euchre on their bid in the states. So we hope we wish them well as they go wrestle for a state championship. This is Andrew Arnold. He bowled in the regional competition this past week. Unfortunately, he didn't qualify for states, but mark my words, he will be PV's first bowling state champion. This kid is an immaculate bowler, and I know next year he's got a couple years of high school left, so he will be phenomenal in the years to come. This is our robotics team. They had a competition this weekend. They didn't do as well as they wanted to, but they do have a competition in 4 weeks where they are looking to improve on already, as you can see, a very intricate robot. We got to see that cool presentation. They've got a new robot. It does interesting things. It plays like, or it picks up pieces and puts it into, I can't explain it. I don't know robots. So that's them. So we're hoping for the best from them in the next 4 weeks. Last slide. And our high school is putting on Mean Girls this spring as a play. I know some of the people in this cast. They're working extremely hard. So that will be March 30th, March 31st, and April 1st here. Well, I guess it will be at the middle school. So if you are free those days, come see this show. I'm sure it will not disappoint. And that is my student liaison report. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. So this evening, my partner in this work is running the camera. So if it's all right, I'll just sit here, Mrs. Smith, and I would like to follow up on the transportation audit and share with the board where we are right now. So we think about our shared beliefs and creating supportive schools and strong partnerships, and working with our transportation company on this audit has been an example of trying to uphold those beliefs. We have a recommendation for you this evening, and if the board would feel so inclined, I would request they consider taking action. But you can hear where we're headed before you decide that. So the goals of this portion of the audit were to assess the assigned walking routes for our students out of those 3 elementary schools. Evergreen, Schwanksville, Skippack South does not have any walkers. And we wanted to learn the walking or bus riding preferences of their parents. And ultimately, we continue to strive to improve the efficiency of student transportation overall. So these are our survey results. We administered surveys to 254 parents, or parents of 254 students is how I should say that. We requested that parents submit a survey response for each child. So you can see the breakdown here of the respondents from the schools that they represent. These are the grades, fairly equally distributed. And then this question is really the important one. If a bus is made available, what would you do? What's your preference? So the blue, I'm interested in having my child take a bus to and from school. So I'm a walker right now. If the district offers bus transportation, 29% or so indicated they would be interested in that. Almost 57% indicated they want to continue to walk. That sort of surprised us a little bit. We were pleased to see that, though. And then a group of our parents, almost 15%, will continue to transport or be transported by parents. So let's break this down a little bit further. I mentioned there are 254 walkers out of these 3 schools. Evergreen has 107, Schwanksville 59, Skippack 88, and I mentioned to you last month, Evergreen walks the furthest distance and has raised the most serious questions for me as well as for Mr. Ganesh, and we've partnered on this, and I really want to thank him for all of his data mining and his assistance of STA in us gathering the data that we needed to really conduct this evaluation and audit to date. And lots more to share with you as the year progresses. But this evening, we have 144 responses from our walker group. That's 57%. And if you look at the breakdown, let's jump to the bottom, skip back. Only 3 students, or parents of 3 students, expressed an interest in a bus. At Schwanksville, only 5. At Evergreen, it's about 31. And again, this is the area that I have the most questions about, particularly through Cranberry, and for some of our youngest students, the distance they have to walk. So the recommendation at this point, I'm going to come at you with this before I go into a little bit more detail, is to request that you approve an exception to Policy 810, which is transportation, and that you would allow for the implementation of district transportation for all Evergreen Elementary students who opt for transportation for the remainder of this school year. we would like to continue the audit and consider some additional aspects of transportation before we go beyond this. But in the short term, we would like to offer transportation to these students at Evergreen. Now I have a brief little video. I want to show you just a portion of that and depict a little bit more clearly some of the questions that I have. So we're coming down Wortman Road, and just to give you a sense, if you're not familiar, Wortman Road is the road that goes behind the high school. And it comes up behind Cranberry, if you can follow that. So it'll go behind East, and then it'll come up, and it will actually, there's an entrance from Wortman Road into Cranberry. This is called Longwood. And now we're on North Ridge. So this is the road that's at the very top of Cranberry, just over a mile from Evergreen Elementary. It may feel like the driver is moving at about 55 miles an hour, but they are not. We've talked about this. Mr. Ganesh has this at 3 times. Yes, he's created the video in that way. So there's just a couple things that I want to point out to you. Okay, so now I'm at the end of North Ridge. That's about a quarter mile long or so, that road. And we're going to turn left onto Cranberry Boulevard, which goes right down the development. So it's a 2-lane, double yellow line right here. There's a pretty big section. There are no crosswalks right here. Fairly big sort of circle, if you will. Again, large area to cross, and there are no crosswalks on either side. If I continue down Cranberry Drive, we will pass additional roads. There are no crosswalks, and they're pretty wide. Bumps, which are really helpful, and I appreciate that the township or the borough has the bumps in some of the developments that we're looking at. There are sidewalks, there are more bumps. As we continue through some of these crossroads, there was a crosswalk horizontal, not vertically. So you get the idea. And we're over a mile away. So the request is to consider, as a board, providing transportation for all Evergreen students. As Mr. Ganesh and I have mentioned, we are able to accommodate the students on buses that are currently running because they're not at capacity. The suggestion or recommendation would be that a bus runs through Cranberry and makes 4 stops. They're circled here in red, where they would exist, and then heads over to Evergreen to drop the students off. This details some additional information about really what I've just summarized, and I would be happy to entertain questions from the board. In this presentation, we also looked at the ride for the Schwanksville walkers. What does that look like? They actually they're across the street from Schwanksville, as well as in Maple Hill. The greatest distance from the school is about 3/4 of a mile, not quite as far as Evergreen. There are sidewalks, there are bumps through Maple Hill. There are areas where there are not always crosswalks. Again, I'd like to talk to the borough and the townships about that. But we have no recommended changes for the assigned walkers at Schwanksville or for Skipback. Moving forward, we'd like to continue with the audit, and we are still working pretty diligently with STA. We want to actually assess secondary walkers in Cranberry as well, and all routes, public, special education, non-public. We are working on this right now with STA and looking to make adjustments this spring to bring efficiencies to what's happening. In the summer, we want to establish clear timelines and requirements for the roster development and the routing, particularly with our non-pub students. We want to sort of fine-tune that process a little bit along with ours. And again, continue to work to bring efficiencies to our process so that we avoid these late bus runs in the morning. We have enough drivers and they can support each of the buses that we need to have up and running. Any questions from the board?
Can you give us an update on the current state of transportation with the busing issues we've been having?
The current state has not been encouraging in terms of them adding staff, which was something that we had really tried to work with them on, and they were supporting. It seems as if when they get somebody who's trained or at a place where they earn their CDL, they lose somebody. So they are short, and we're still getting these texts in the morning that 2 or 3 buses are running late, up to an hour. If we can bring efficiencies, which we anticipate recommending to them this spring, we hope to be able to free up buses so that a bus doesn't have to do double duty, if you will. So the situation is not really much better when it comes to staffing. They're still short a number of qualified drivers for the buses that they need up and running.
So by efficiencies, you're saying they're not utilizing the bus space correctly right now, or their bus runs? Because, you know, you're saying we can add these students without adding bus runs, or but will that affect what we're looking at for efficiency down the road?
It won't right now. We're looking at some other bus runs where we can bring some greater efficiencies and free up some buses, we believe, through some non-pub runs. So those are the ones that we're zeroing in on right now. But yes, buses are not being filled to capacity, or even in all cases 2 to a seat.
Are we looking at bringing in a new bus company for next year?
We haven't done that yet, but it is something that we may be prompted to do if this audit does not help us to get the service to where we need it to be, back on track.
Dr. Russell, what did the survey ask why they elected to start riding versus walking?
No, it didn't ask for the reason as to why they might want to shift to walking. And I would be guessing if I tried to offer you some reasons. I've heard from a couple of parents, but not a large number of parents, in terms of the reason.
I mean, is the response good? I mean, only 57% responded. Is that typical?
In terms of surveys, that's a pretty good response rate, although it's a small n, it's a small number overall. So we would have certainly hoped for many more of those 254 students to be represented in those results. So some of those individuals, I'm guessing, are comfortable with the situation as is.
So do you have a timeline that you're going to, by this point, your audit's going to be done so that you can have a good idea whether you're going to be able, or STA is going to be able to fulfill with the changes that you foresee making, that they're going to be able to service all the bus runs that we need? Or you think it sounds like you think we're pretty close?
I do. And I would request that the board consider taking action on this item tonight. I'd like to move these students onto the bus or buses if possible ASAP. And then we have set a target date for the end of this month, the beginning of April, to free up some buses. Again, attempting to bring some efficiencies, free up some buses, and reallocate those buses so that we're not getting those text messages about late buses in the morning, so that students are not arriving an hour or an hour and 15 minutes late. And we have a way to do that, and we're working collaboratively with STA, and we're aiming for the first week in April.
But at the same time, shouldn't we be looking for a new company for next year? Because we can't just have these issues continuing for years on end.
At this point, we believe the conversations are leading us to think that we can bring the improvements we need to get the service back to where it needs to be. So at this point, that's where administration is. Now, if beginning of April, we're not getting the results that we believe we should realize, we may have to start to have a different conversation.
But we're in the name of like policy and governance for a school district, not creating efficiencies for a bus company, which is what we're doing.
So when I say create efficiencies, I'm summarizing, we are working to have them reallocate students to buses to free up other buses.
Yeah, that should be their job.
Understood.
Yeah. So they're taking up our resources to create efficiencies for them, which is not a good sign from a business perspective. They should be creating these efficiencies on their own. They should be providing solutions. They should be saying, hey, if we take bus X2 and shift this there, then that frees up. And they're not doing that. So it just concerns that if we can't find a secondary company, that we're going to have these same problems next year.
So I do want to say that they are starting to recognize these efficiencies as I refer to them. However, I appreciate your point, and there certainly have been some reservations about the outcome of this audit and what we might be able to produce. How the last conversation left us feeling more confident, and we believe that we can get this to where it needs to be. It is a partnership right now. It is a collaborative effort. At the same time, I'm happy to speak to Mr. Subers about the possibilities of moving forward and considering another vendor. I don't know what the likelihood is out there to get another vendor that can provide a comprehensive service. I just don't know at this point, but administration can begin to explore that, to have that as a plan B.
I have had discussions with Mr. Weaver regarding a potential escalation of the enforcement of our remedies, and he is informally exploring additional options available for us for transportation needs, and that's where it stands right now. I mean, we have begun those discussions and the exploration of alternative providers.
Because I completely agree that it's been unacceptable, and I know I've thought that we need a new vendor, and we've gotten that email a lot, but I mean, we just did this RFP not too long ago. We didn't get any other.
Therein lies part of the problem, is the
Right.
current industry is a nightmare to begin with. We have very little options at this point in time. Even in garnering additional transportation for our robotics club, we basically had to call 10 different transportation companies, all local, and they had none.
Right. So I just
and
want
that's
to
for one
say
van,
publicly
yes.
that it's not that easy, that we looked for an alternate transportation company when we did this contract, and there was no one.
There were two. Yep.
And that was back when when transportation was more readily available when you did that. Since then, the issue with transportation across districts and across the state has gotten substantially worse, making it, I would imagine, even more difficult than what you encountered the last time you looked for other vendors, unfortunately.
I would certainly agree with that, Dr. Campley.
Is it possible to ask STA to be responsible for some of the hours, in a financial form, because we're working together? That is, I would think, something that they should be doing. Can they pay the district back for some of the hours that has been put into us doing the legwork to bring this to their attention?
We are continuing to impose pretty significant penalties for their failure to perform. I can look into what you're raising. I have not looked at that before, but the administration's been pretty aggressive, very aggressive in imposing significant penalties.
I will say, too, until this year, we've had a pretty good working relationship with STA. This year has really thrown a wrench into the system, and it has remained a real challenge for some of our students, and we are not comfortable with them continually being late. And it's random buses, but some students have been late a series of times. We're at spring sports started today. Things are only going to get busier. Field trips happen this time of year. So there are real concerns around the service that we expect, but I have hope. We're working really diligently with them. They've been collaborative, and I have faith that we can take some steps forward and do so before the end of this year.
Solicitor's report?
I have no report.
Just, we continue to have a lack of someone attending our MCIU meetings. So I'm hoping that leadership is taking care of that.
I don't want to speak out of order so much, but I'd just like to not respond, but explain. The 22nd, I didn't know it at the last meeting, but it happened to be Ash Wednesday, and so forgive me for that. I apologize.
The consent agenda is items that represent the standard routine business of the board are included in the consent agenda below. Any requests to have anything removed? Seeing none, we will move to 7 o'clock for education.
Item 4.01, Mrs. Smith will present the Education Committee of the Whole.
Good evening, everyone. We have a couple of items on the Education Committee. Oh, there we go. As you can see, we have 6 different items, and Dr. Boyd will join me at number 4 for special education. I'll start out with our summer programs. There are several action items this month for your consideration, all in regards to our LIFT programming. So as I shared with you last month and you approved the overall LIFT program, there are 3 branches of LIFT: learning, camps, and library, and I'll speak specifically to those on the agenda this month. PVHS, our high school here, runs a credit recovery program. We have done this for many, many years, where we utilize the high school library, and students that may not have passed one of their courses can take that course during the summer with staff oversight from our teachers. That is something that we use online curriculum because of the vast number of courses here at the high school. We use from EduSeer or Montgomery Virtual Program, either one of those. There is a cost to students per course, as you can see on the screen there. So there are items, I believe 2 for this actually on the agenda this evening. 1 to approve the summer credit recovery and counting those, and then 1 to continue our partnerships for MVP and EduSeer. New this year, as part of the LIFT learning side of things, which is typically academic reinforcement of skills, we would like to add, this is Mrs. O'Sullivan's idea here, is to add a summer acceleration math course. We often have many students at the middle level who may not qualify directly to take Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, maybe because of assessments or different criteria that we look at, but really are motivated to do that. And our concern has always been wanting the students to actually experience the content, to be prepared, because they are missing the 8th grade math course if they move to Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And so this is a great opportunity that would not have a cost to it for our students, but that they could sign up for this course. We actually have one of our own Algebra 1 teachers from the middle school has already agreed to teach the course. We're really excited to be able to offer this additional pathway for a student to access that while, making sure that we're exposing them to that curriculum, that some of those skills from that 8th grade math course, to make sure that they are ready. So that's an exciting piece that we would like to include in our LIFT learning program. In terms of the library, we've done this for the last 2 years where we opened up the library, both at the elementary and secondary levels. We rotate some of the libraries 3 days per level, 4 hours per time. We typically have 2 staff members in. We offer book selection to our community. We offer different activities. Sometimes there's read alouds. It is open to district residents. And I just gave you some of the information in terms of the number of attendees and the books that have been checked out. You see that grew a little bit last summer. We'd like to see that obviously continue to grow. And most of our district librarians are very interested in helping to support this summer. So that is an action item as well. And then our camps, we are in the throes of preparing all of the camps that will be offered to our students this summer. And at our elementary level, we have partnered for the last 2 years very successfully with Penn State University, where they provide the staffing and the content and the curriculum for these week-long camps. We offer them in the morning and in the afternoon for 3 weeks in July. We offer all of the offerings that are on the right are available to our students in K to 5, and you can see we offer up to a maximum of, bless you, 24 seats and a minimum of 12 in order for that camp to run. I would really love to open up registrations for these earlier than we have in the past. It's typically been May, and some families are already thinking about their summer. So this is an action item on the agenda for this month for approval of an agreement with Penn State for them to continue offering these. You can see I just gave you some of the background from summer of 21 and 22 in terms of how many seats were available, what our fill rate was, and if you recall that first summer there was no charge. Last summer there was a $50 charge. This summer, given the costs here, and you'll see on the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the costs of LIFT in general. I am proposing a $75 per student cost here. That would completely cover the cost if 60% of those seats are filled. So I'm trying to kind of go in the middle, assuming we won't have 100% fill rate. I went with that 67%. And then just the last thing with LIFT programming, historically you can see some of our costs here for summer 21 and summer 22 and how we funded them. Remaining in ESSER 3 and the ARP ESSER set-asides for learning loss, we have about $115,000. So you will notice that some things are being presented slightly differently this year, where we covered all of the costs the first year, and then we've slowly been weaning back, still wanting to offer these, but of course not necessarily having the funds to continue fully covering everything. So we are proposing that, and you'll see in the action items, that we would be funding the salary, the benefits, resources, materials, and student transportation for anything that falls under LIFT learning, other than our PVHS credit recovery. And then there would be student fees for credit recovery, as well as any of the camps, those 1 week camps that they are coming in. And I will just point out, it isn't a typo, we are considering the transportation would be provided again for those longer LIFT learning that is coming in from June through July. I think it's 18 days, but that we would not provide transportation for the 1 week camps. That is quite a bit of logistics there, as well as quite a bit of a cost. So those would be some of the differences. Any questions on anything regarding summer programs or the action items? Yes. You can come up to the mic if you want, Trina.
Trina Sadler, Skip-Pack. So as it relates to the credit recovery program, what if parents can't afford to pay for that? Do we like, okay, I just wanted to make sure. And then for the LIFT, the summer programs, you were saying that you don't provide transportation for that, right? Parents have, for the camps with Penn State, the parents have to drop them off. Actually, my children participated in that, and it was the best experience they had when they did those summer camps. And it wasn't inconvenient for me to drop them off. I was off in the summer, so it didn't matter. But I think that's a great program, and I really like the accelerated math idea to really get kids prepared for that algebra class. So good job.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadler. And just for the mic and for anybody who might be viewing this later, we do work with families if they have a hardship through the counselor, and we help to cover those costs for any of the credit recovery. And anything through LIFT that does have a cost, you are correct, the camps would have a cost and would not have transportation provided this year. But there is a form that families can fill out that they are requesting, if there's a hardship in their family. And those that I have received, we have certainly approved those as well. So we have processes in place to support our families. Anything else from the public on LIFT? Yeah, Betsy.
Betsy Stone, Skip Back. I had a question actually on the camps, because I know some of them fill up much quicker than others. When we're planning them, are you looking at what overfilled last year, and do we start a waiting list? Because I know, I don't have elementary kids anymore, but I know parents of elementary kids who were like, oh, I missed it, and I couldn't get into the camp my kid wanted. So are we looking at it from that sense? And if we have enough kids on a waiting list where it could be a whole nother section, if you will, are we looking at modifying things that way, just to get more people involved? Because I have heard they're very good.
Thank you. Great question again. So what we did was we did look at the camps and what the fill rate was last year. So there were some that maybe didn't fill, and we chose to offer something different this year. So we do try to do that. We also, in addition to these, we do offer camps run by our staff. So like, for example, young engineers, we will have a drama camp for our elementary students as well. So anything that is, though, a contract with a third-party vendor, we bring to the board for approval, but there will be more camps than this. We tried wait lists the first year. It was a logistical nightmare, just to be honest, with the wait list, but absolutely, if I see that something has filled, we can consider, do we want to, offer an additional session of that? We would need to adjust then the contract. I can say, though, I think for the most part, we've gotten pretty good at this the last 2 years in figuring out where the needs are for our students. And our staff, I have to say, have overwhelmingly stepped up to offer camps this summer. In fact, the middle school will be completely run by our own teachers this summer. We won't be having any contracts with third-party vendors for there. Anything else? Okay, thank you. So second one is just we have a curriculum resource pilot that I want to share with you. This is something that doesn't require board approval, but that we always make you aware of, that we are piloting something. We're not committing to a purchase at this time. This is Accelerated Reader. You might remember when we purchased STAR Reader and STAR Math for the secondary schools. This is another program through Renaissance that would specifically support our high school English language arts students. We are piloting through April 30th. You can see some of the other information on the screen. It is a free pilot that they are willing to allow us to do. And basically, in a nutshell, this is a way to assess the comprehension of students when they are reading, different self-selected texts out of our library or that they've gotten, at home or purchased at Barnes & Noble. We are not providing them texts. This is a way to ask them comprehension questions, and they respond to those questions, and it helps the teacher then to understand, are they comprehending what they are reading? Because the teacher obviously can't possibly read every single text that a student may have picked up somewhere. So this is a way to help them, and it does align with the STAR assessments in helping students to select a book that is the just right, as we call it, fit for them. So you'll hear more about this as we get through the end of the pilot, if it's something that we may or may not be recommending to purchase for the future. Questions on that at all? Okay. Then in elementary, we also have a resource pilot. There's a lot of text on this screen. I'll just really quickly summarize. As we've implemented STAR at the secondary levels, we used to have something at the elementary. We had the MAP assessments, which fed into what was called Exact Path and created an individualized learning path for students on their device, a software package. Those agreements with those companies expired, and instead of just renewing them, we felt like it was time to do our due diligence. Technology changes so quickly. What might we be able to find? And so we have brought together a committee of teachers. You can see the rubric we developed and the areas that we looked at in terms of looking for some sort of screener, and then a tool that would, again, be individualized for students. And what we are bringing for, again, a pilot for the, you can see March and April, is really Renaissance and STAR has risen to the top for the elementary as well, which that is an advantage to have a consistent tool, elementary and secondary. But we have 8 teachers that have been on this committee since about, I think, November we started this. We would be piloting STAR assessments and the use of Freckle. And you can see this one does have a cost for the professional development piece of that. So again, not committing to a purchase, more to come should we decide that this is a direction we'd want to go in, again, making you aware. Questions at all on pilots? Next up is just a plug for, if you don't have something to do on Thursday night, please come out. Last year we had a very successful Hogwarts Academy at Middle School East. It is a K-8 family night. It is for parents, guardians, students to come on out. It is the red carpet night, so come on out to the movies. You can stretch your stuff down the red carpet, get some paparazzi pictures, see some movie characters, and my team has just some amazing activities planned, and a huge thank you again to our staff, because they are the ones that come and staff this and create the activities. So sure to be a great night, 6 o'clock. I'm sure you've gotten some emails about this. And Dr. Boyd.
Thank you, everyone. So each year I come before the board really to share just an update on the annual report. And this is connected to Policy 113. So it's really to provide you with an update around staffing, our programming, and again, how we evaluate the effectiveness of the programs that we do in fact offer. So when we talk about that piece, last year, if you recall, we had our special education plan that we brought to the board that takes us through, I believe, next year. Next year, we will enter into redeveloping that plan. It's typically every 3 years. The pandemic sort of offset things, but it runs through next year, and then next year we will be bringing a committee together again for the next 3 year of the special education plan. Last year, we also went through compliance monitoring, if you recall, and we brought information to the board with regard to how we did with that, and we did very well. That typically occurs once every 6 to 7 years. Each year, we present the December 1 count information. So further in this presentation, I have some of that information from our recent December 1 count. And then in July, we also submit other information. So through that Penn data, there's a series of indicators. I believe there's 11 different areas that we are required to report on. Some is disproportionality. It has to do with our graduation rates, dropout rates, the amount of time students are in special education versus general education, the disability categories, as well as parent involvement. So that December 1 count really is that snapshot in time each year across the Commonwealth. All school districts capture their data at that time. The Penn Data website is here, and anyone can go there, but that's where you can find information on all of the different indicators that are captured through the Bureau of Special Ed and PDE. And again, this is about information for our students who receive special education supports and services. And when we break that down, here is what represents some of our December 1 count for this year. We report the number of teachers, the number of paraprofessionals, as well as the number of students in special education. So as of December 1st, these were our numbers. I've shared the average caseloads for our learning support classrooms, and then also for our district level programs, our emotional support, autistic support, life skills. Those caseload sizes by the requirements through PDE and special education are lower. They tend to be 8 to 12 typically. Here what you see is March 1st. So if I go back December to March, we've seen a significant increase right now in the number of students qualifying for special education services. This really is just an example. It's the ebb and flow that happens throughout the course of a school year. We are absolutely noticing more requests for evaluations from our parents, as well as referrals coming through our schools. The caseloads are still remaining within those numbers as indicated by the levels, where we are seeing a slight increase. We're seeing an increase in the learning support classrooms as well, but we're within those levels. We've also seen some increases primarily in the emotional support classrooms at the elementary, middle, and high school level. And you see that at the bottom. Right there, I'm showing a range of 8 to 14. So if we take a look at those numbers and those categories, I show this slide to you each year and give you that progression to see where is it similar and where is it different. The area that right now that we're noticing a difference is specific learning disability. That is slightly higher. And what we're looking at is really how is learning loss, the pandemic, impacting our students? What are we able to do to support their learning needs to prevent identification for special education? So what we're seeing is primarily behavioral needs are on the rise. We're doing a couple of things. Last year, you approved MTSS facilitators at the secondary level, which are in place this year. The other piece that we've started, Dr. Sachs and myself, we've initiated a district-level MTSS team, working collaboratively with the IU to take a look at our data, look at what's happening before we get to special education and a referral, and can we put interventions into place to address learning needs for students to ultimately prevent potentially an evaluation into special ed. If students have a need and they're not progressing through interventions where we can take and put scientifically based resources in front of students, intervene, collect data, if they're not making progress, then we can certainly move forward with an evaluation. But we're trying to put stopgaps in there and also see, is it a result of not having a learning experience? during the pandemic? Or is it truly a special education need that requires supports and services through that lens? What we're seeing right now is definitely an increase in behavioral needs for our students. We have things in place. We contract with Creative Health Services. We have SAP through them. They also provide some school-based counseling for our students with IEPs. We're layering in professional development across the school year. You've heard Mrs. Smith talk quite a bit over the course of the school year about the different professional learning opportunities that we're putting into place on those half-day in services, as well as the Act 80 days, and then through the summer. We've also recently learned that the PCCD grant was approved, and with that, we will be looking at behavioral counseling supports through Lakeside and the MCIU to support in our buildings. And then we're working on a county-level grant, also looking at behavioral services, looking at RBTs, the registered behavioral therapists, contracted counselors, as well as a redesign of the high school counseling center. If we go backwards now and we look at our students that come into us, each year we move through the early intervention process, and this is really a partnership with the IU. So these are the students that we're capturing before they come to school age. We start that process in December. We've finished meeting with families, but then the evaluation process will take place, and we will continue to meet with families, develop IEPs through May and June. So right now what we're seeing is a total of 37 students. Now, not all 37 are represented in this chart. What I've shared with you is the number of students that we anticipate potentially needing autistic support programming within the district, intensive learning support programming, and then those students that are speech only. Most of these students have a disability category that comes with them called developmental delays. It's not a disability category recognized at the school age level. So what we end up looking at is we meet with those families, we conduct an evaluation, we identify the needs of the students, and then determine what type of programming do they need. Can they go to their home school? Can they be supported within that building? Or do they require a district level program? And in the past, we've come to you and said, I believe it was last year, we had a large number of students that we knew would be requiring that autistic support programming at the district level, and we needed to add a teacher. So we've seen that growth. What I'm saying to you this evening is based on these numbers, we do not anticipate needing to add any teachers to accommodate the students that are coming to us. We should be able to support them with the current staffing that we do in fact have. Sorry, it's not advancing for me. If we go to the oldest end of our students, those transition years, and we've talked a great deal about this since August. We did hire the job coach. She is on board, and we are working with her right now to move through the process, looking at the mail run, breaking down the task analysis that's involved with that, and then we anticipate that we will have that up and going within the next few weeks. We're also looking at we've talked about the transition coordinator and that independent living space, which again has been part of Mr. Weaver's presentation. So those would again be the next steps. But we have secured the job coach, and again, as we talk about who's involved with this, the reason for that transition coordinator is because that population will continue to grow. Again, as we bring students in through early intervention, we're capturing them, we're keeping them in the district, and many of those students are remaining with us till the age of 21. So we're seeing that population growing at that high school level. We know in the 24, 25, 25, 26 school year, we'll need someone to manage the caseload. A transition coordinator would carry a caseload as well as advance those opportunities for transition services for our students. And again, this is a slide you've seen before in terms of what we currently offer, what we're looking to do. Next up is the cafeteria work. Now that we have the job coach, we're in conversations with the cafeteria, and we anticipate the mail run and then work experiences within our cafeteria occurring within the next few weeks to a month. some new things that are coming up or have taken place. We did engage with some of our high school families of the children that are of that transition age. And we met at the So Much to Give Cafe and talked about what are the supports and services that we have in place and are doing well. What is it that our families need so that we can work on improving those services for our families and connect them with those resources beyond high school. So we're continuing those conversations. We have some ideas that we hope to put into place as we move through the remainder of this school year and then into next school year. And another opportunity coming up will be the MCIU Resource Fair. And again, this is typically vendors, a variety of agencies that will come in and will talk with our families or be accessible to our families, not just for Perkiomen Valley, but also within the county. So this flyer is shared out with school districts across the county. They're invited to come in, and it provides, again, our families with opportunities to engage with others around what kinds of supports and services are out there for our families, for our students, again, as they move beyond high school. We also have the opportunity this year for a Special Olympics track and field event. It's hosted at Springford High School. It's going to be held on May 24th, and I believe right now we have about 53 students who have sent back their participation paperwork and will be participating that day. So we're really looking forward to that. We have not done this in quite some time. Before the pandemic, we hosted our own PV Olympics, but our students only engaged with one another here within our district. We're very excited about this opportunity to engage with other students across the county in, just some good track and field activities. And then we did recently complete the bocce team winter season, and that was new for us this year. That was really a lot of fun. It drew quite a crowd at the high school. We had gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, gen ed students, special education students, and a lot of our high school student population came out to support the two meets that were held here on site. And now we're getting ready for our track and field team to begin. So again, we're just really excited that we've been able to partner with Unified Sports, and we now have 2 different seasons that we can offer our students and our student athletes. Are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Mears.
If a transition coordinator is not approved, what would be your remedy? Because I think I heard you say that because of the increased caseload, what would be the remedy for that?
Again, we're looking at that for the 24-25 school year in terms of the increased caseload. At that time, we would then be coming to the board most likely to request an additional special education teacher if we don't get the transition coordinator. With that being said, we want to really expand those opportunities and branch out. I did not mention it here, but the role of that transition coordinator managing the caseload, also doing that community outreach to develop those partnerships. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. About a week or a couple days after our annual data presentation, the state finally released the individual school scores. So we have shared this with the board in our weekly memo, but wanted to publicly just put out there. This is a county comparison. So this first slide, I think, is ELA in the upper left corner. Oh, you have ELA, then math and science all on there. This is a grade 3 to 8 look, though. So the way that the state reports it is we just kind of put all of 3 to 8 together. These are then the percentage of students proficient and advanced. So these are the county schools, and you can see the orange highlighted is where we fall in the county. So happy to see that across all of the areas we are in the upper half here in terms of our PSSA scores. And then you can see the Keystone scores. This is reported a little bit differently, sometimes harder to understand because it is reported for 11th grade, even though maybe a student took their algebra Keystone, as a 9th grader when they took algebra. This is the 11th grade comparison. So when they, are in 11th grade, their scores are actually reported. So you can, again, see where we fell this past year in 2022. And then I just did, one of the questions at the annual data presentation was how do we compare to the state? So I just threw together a real quick graph for you just to show the state is blue. This is ELA, again, grades 3 to 8. PV is the red. So as you can see, as we're coming out of the pandemic, we are showing definitely more of an increase and the state continues to decline. And then in math, you can see a relatively similar pattern across the state. However, we are outperforming the state. And then I have the science, which is grades 4 to 8. Questions on any of that assessment data? Okay. Last topic then for us is just enrollment and staffing projections. It looks pretty similar to what it looked like last month. We are still at this point at the elementary projecting a +1 needed here. You'll notice that it's at Evergreen, just basically based upon enrollments and our class size guidelines. What I do have new to share for you on the right, and this actually I updated it today, is I asked each of the buildings how many students are in kindergarten registration. These are students that are either somewhere in the online registration process or have scheduled appointments at the buildings for registration. These are going to fluctuate significantly over the next couple of weeks. Skipback has already completed their registrations where families come in and meet. The other buildings are gearing up, and there's one building a week as we move forward. So we'll continue to share that with you and watch the kindergarten numbers. Middle level, again, this is the same as it was last month. We are still projecting the declining enrollment has really hit the middle level this coming year with 4 positions that could be reallocated elsewhere. And the high school is really a net here with no requests at the high school. So preliminary staffing, you've seen this chart before. It has not changed here. We have 3 total positions based upon enrollment that could be reallocated. And you see those positions on the right that we are either asking for or that need to be built into the budget because they were approved previously. So when Mr. Weaver presents his budget, it is still a +1 in terms of teaching positions in the budget. I do anticipate that in April, we may see some adjustments to this as a bulk of our staffing work will be done here in the month of March. And I would just note that we have, through the memo, asked the board to consider an ad hoc committee of the Education Committee so that we can share some administrative ideas around the 3 topics that you see on the screen. The English Language Development Program you saw in our data presentation, that we are not making the progress we'd like to with our students' performance. We are working with the IU, and I have some preliminary information and ideas regarding staffing that I'd like to be able to share and have more conversation. We would like to also revisit elementary special, and just talk about the programming changes that we did make pre-pandemic, where we're at now, and what recommendations we have. And then I would also like to just begin to entertain a conversation regarding full-day kindergarten, as we are one of 3 districts in the county that do not offer full-day K. So that's a much longer conversation, but just something I kind of wanted to plant a seed for. So I am recommending the last 2 Mondays of the month having an education ad hoc committee where we can come together, share ideas, and then really have some conversation to be able to bring back some recommendations to the board in April. And there might be other topics if we get through these, but and then we have 4 board members who have in the past been part of an education committee that I believe through conversations we would ask to continue on this, but we can certainly have conversations about that. Any questions on staffing? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. 4.02 through 4.05 were all discussed during the presentation. If there aren't any questions, we can move those to consent. 4.06 is a placeholder. 4.07 is a approval of a ratification of an overnight trip. Are there any questions? Can move that to consent. 4.08 is the approval of a foreign exchange student from Italy. Are there any questions? Move that to consent. And 4.09 is the enrollment report, which we just saw in the presentation. So that ends section 4.
Thank you very much, Ms. Evans-Brockett. Mr. Fountain, business.
All right, good evening, everybody. So we have a couple of items to hit. Mr. Fabrizio and myself will kind of dance through the first couple here. Assuming. Okay, Well, saving the battery. We like that. That's good. Okay, so it looks like a lot going on, but the board is familiar with many of the things in the top part. With the capital projects, we'll bring updates on that. We have a recommendation to discuss about the food service van for next week. The RFQs came in today, and I'll explain a little bit of that. Request for replacement of a lawnmower, an older lawnmower that finally gave out on us that we need to replace as we head into the springtime for our own mowing operations. We'll review the E-rate for this year under Mr. Ganesh, and then we'll have a quick budget update and then some recommendations to move forward with fund balance discussions and uses for our 23-24 budget. Right up front, the school board has an update for ESCO 5.0 and 4.0. That's in your packet there. I'm not going to get into that. No need for Mr. Mowry or Mr. Hanson to be here. Just read it up. Take your chance, read it. Let me know if you have any questions and we'll follow up. There is not much happening in the way of shovels in the ground, but there's a lot of paperwork going on behind the scenes to prepare for the beginning of ESCO 5.0, and we continue to harp on and work hard on ESCO 4.0 to get those final pieces of that puzzle, mainly the national natural gas pipeline at West in place. Any questions from the school board on that? Any questions from the community? Okay, thank you. All right, moving forward, the concession stand. So here is a design that we've been working on. Last month, we brought forward a possibility of us working together with North Montco VOTEC students. We did the legal thing. We reviewed it with Mr. Subers and Mr. Sultanic, who is representing North Montco, and that's not going to work. So we're back to where we were before that idea. So here you see a design associated with what the concession stand looks like currently and some ideas that we have in the future, what the new plan looks like moving forward. We're still working out the details. Essentially, remember, we are shifting where the current concession stand is, where you get your food, moving it to the other end of the building, and then prepping some other areas inside to make up for ground storages and expanding those areas, and then adding the ADA bathrooms where the current concession stand operations go out of. So we're continue to work on that. We do need a formal bid packet on that. We have worked on an asphalt portion of that. If you recall, we did have the patio block that we looked at several months ago. That price was formidable. And we've looked at two different scenarios of an all concrete and an asphalt. Of course, the concrete's higher than the asphalt, so right now we're working on a recommendation on that. We envision having that for April to move forward as a separate piece. So keep that in mind. We continue to work on that process. Any questions on that particular piece of, I know this has been batted around a little bit. We're finally got direction and headway, and we're moving in that direction. Another component to that is the FCS renovations. Here is a schematic. The neat thing is Mr. Fabrizio has utilized his own internal technology app to create this space. He actually has a really neat 3D rendering that he's been working with the formal group. And what we've done is we have an estimated cost of $105,000, but we are looking back into what it will be for a packet for us to go out. Again, we had to wait until we had conversation about the North Montco students. We did think that was another possibility for us. Now that we know that that is not for the concession stand, we also know now that that's not a possibility for us for the FCS renovation, which means a formal bid packet has to go out. Any questions on that particular piece?
Just out of curiosity, I see we have an estimate for the FCS renovations, but do we have an estimate for the concession stand?
At this point in time, we do not, because the previous estimate we had was that big $475,000. And so now we broke that up into pieces. And so the main component now that we have to go back out for bid is we don't have an estimated cost yet. There really isn't a whole heck of a lot of work, to be honest with you. A couple of blocks get cut out of the existing block for the end, some lentils, and then the ADA accessibility will be the major cost renovation of that. Oops. Okay, high school counseling renovations. Once again, Once we've discovered about the North Montco students wouldn't work, again, there were 3 of them there. So now we know we have to go out with a formal bid packet. Our estimate is about $100,000, and we do have grant money set aside. We are reconnecting with the high school counselors, the administration, high school administration, and our own central group here to make sure that we get what we want with these high school renovations. We've had different various options that we've gone through, and so now we're finally gaining some headway in this particular piece to move forward. Again, we do anticipate in April coming forward with that from an RFP is out on the street perspective as an update. Very critical we get the information back and the high school counselors agree with the options that we're going to present to them. Middle School East Auditorium. This is a newer item. We've been tracking this for several years, but a newer one to our conversation here. We continue to look at the upgrade to the Middle School East Auditorium, specific the audiovisual capabilities. The estimated cost is about $45,000. Mr. Ganesh is really driving a lot of this stuff. We do expect to have formal board approval on this particular item moving forward in April, and they're working on construction in July. So just in time for the start of the school year. Again, there's a lot on that one that's relatively new, but we are moving forward with that one.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure. Go ahead, Dr. Campley.
So I was just curious, when you talk about like the live streaming options available for Middle School East, is that something that West has the current capability to do as well as the high school, or is this only going to be Middle School East Auditorium that has that capability?
So Dr. Campley, this will be a new feature that we'll be trialing at the East Auditorium. If it works well, we'll roll it out to West End High School.
Thank you.
Okay. Other projects to note real quick. So Joe, I might as well do it, Joe. So the high school auditorium, the actual work starts tomorrow, the demolition. Mr. Fabrizio has been working with our colleagues from CM Eichenlob to help get an organized timeline. Everybody's in order. Everybody knows what's happening. The schedule will stretch beginning tomorrow all the way through till the end of July. And it is according to what we've approved and moved forward with. So we're really looking forward to that. Scan card readers. Mr. Fabrizio, you might want to help us out on that one.
Good evening. I'm happy to report we are wrapping up with the card access project. We are at South right now. They should be wrapped up tomorrow, and then we're headed to Skip Back.
What buildings have been completed?
Everything else has been completed. So we're moving right along. Exterior door audit, we just got the results back a couple days ago. I'm going through them, and then I'll have my team start addressing any issues that are found. LED scoreboard installation, we have all the materials on site. That project is kicking off on the 21st, and it should be wrapped up by the 24th. So we're right on target for that.
You hear back from the township about the advertisement?
We are working with our solicitor on that.
And
We're
there's a
moving
meeting
forward.
scheduled, isn't there? An upcoming meeting scheduled with the township?
Not yet. Tomorrow, Joe and I have a final version of the waiver and the appeal.
Okay.
Then we'll move forward.
Put the, subsequent to the last meeting, we followed up, needed some additional, specifics regarding the application. District collected that information. We finalized the application and appeal form. And the next step is going to be an informal meeting to review that with the township. So it's moving forward.
And again, all signs are positive on that, as we expected. Any questions for myself or Mr. Fabrizio on those projects? Any questions from the community? Okay, thank you. All right, food service van recommendation. We opened up bids today. We did have 4 packets that we sent out. We received 2 back. And Mr. Fabrizio and I have to follow up on some of the warranty issues. That's why we don't have a recommendation tonight, but we will have one for you next week. Okay? We just need to make sure, because in this particular case, the values of the warranties matter. So just wanted to let you know that. And again, that's from food service monies. That's not through the general fund. Any questions? Any questions from the community? Okay. All right, lawnmower replacement. So the old lawnmower, 2002, kind of blew an engine. It's not the first time it actually blew an engine, and we rebuilt it. But this time it's at that age. So we are recommending to purchase a new John Deere lawnmower through CoStar's Power Equipment contract, as listed, $27,513.50, and it includes power guard protection, 72-inch cutting deck, all the necessary attachments that Mr. Fabrizio needs, and the operations budget does have the money to cover this particular item at this particular point in time. So I would recommend moving that forward. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Any questions from the community? All right, thank you. All right, E-rate. Mr. Ganesh annually brings forward his E-rate proposal. Karthik, if you want to come up and just hit some high points on this.
Good evening, everyone. So this is an annual process. E-rate provides us up to 40% discount for our technology infrastructure. So these are the projects that we are applying for E-rate funding for this school year. The one thing I do want to mention that the price that you see listed there are the full prices. If and when we get E-rate funding, that cost of the project might go down by up to 40%. And again, this E-rate application is just to secure the funding. If for some reason the new school year, the district funds are not available, we can always call off that project. It's just there's no obligations to it. And also on the right, you see the historical awards that we've gotten the last 4 years. So close to $500,000 in E-rate funding that we have received for our technology infrastructure. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll be recommending moving that forward. And remember, you always wonder what you pay on your telephone and communications bills. All of those line items, one of those actually funds the E-rate, the universal UCC code or whatever it's called. So that's the only thing I guess we can't really get mad about on your telephone bill because it does come back to help us. Any questions on that? Any questions from the community? Okay, thank you. All right, so tonight's budget presentation, real quick, there are no changes to the February revenues. That's not unusual. We'll continue to track some of those items, and remember the governor gives the budget, the statewide budget, tomorrow. So we'll know a heck of a lot more about that from a revenue perspective. Remember, we are revenue neutral right now. We have not shown any increases in our budget presentation for any state subsidies at this point in time. So we're still at $120,315,000. Again, no changes, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I'm going to go to the next batch, which are the expenditures. We have 4 changes for tonight's expenditures. The first is an adjustment for our final VOTEC budget cost that we've received. It's actually a little bit less than what I had in initially, so that's a positive impact on that. We added for the girls wrestling, which we approved last month. We added for the slight increase for the officials to run the pack and all that kind of stuff that we talked about last month. And we had good news through Mr. Moran's participation in Bucksmont. Our second look number actually became a 0. Remember the first one we had in at 4%, we had it at 0. I'm showing it at 1% because last year the second look was a -5% and we actually ended up at a 0. So it moved a lot in that from second to third look. I feel comfortable leaving it at a 1% at this point in time. I might eat those words when the third look comes out, but for now we'll hold it at a 1% increase. So that actually shows like a $100,000 increase overall. Remember, that's a fairly large item. It's a almost a $10 million total item for us. So right now we'll keep it at 1%, and then we'll see how that works out with the third look. All told, it's an actual reduction of $284,000 when you take those 4 into consideration. Again, there are some highlights. Now they've been updated specific for some of these adjustments associated with these items, the object codes. Again, updated with mostly red language so that everybody can see where the changes are made from the prior presentation for the most part. That brings us to our summary, where we're at in the interactive. We're at a 6.77%. That's up in the upper right-hand corner. That's where we're at. We were at a little over 7%. So we made some headway in that regard. And you can see to get to a 4.1%, we've got to adjust, either reduce expenditures, use additional fund balances, or show additional revenues of $2 million, almost a little under $2.1 million. So that's kind of where we sit. Now we move forward to, you all know about our first goal is to get to the 4.1 because that's our Act 1 index. That's the resolution that we agreed to. First of all, any questions on the current 6-point where we're at? Mrs. Evans-Brockett.
I know we have a community meeting tomorrow, but there was basically it turns out to be a $1 million ad for security. If that were not included in the budget, what would our current shortfall be?
So that the total would be about 1.4 million.
So it's 1.4, but then aren't we taking out 400,000 of our current security?
So remember, we already have 8 positions moving forward. So that figure is coming in, and then we would have to backfill. The way I look at it is we would have to backfill those positions for the secondary because the discussion was to go from the initial 8 to another 8. So that's what I have in there. So my understanding is there will be some flexibility when we ultimately determine what that next round is. So it's not necessarily all going to go away because components of that will have to be utilized to backfill for that, really the second shift, if you will. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
So can I throw out a question that I've just been thinking of as listening to some of these things? When it comes to that 1.4 million, and if it goes through, is there any way for there to be some research done of what could potentially be recouped in grants? Like getting a list of different grants and how much money is a potential, get back if we were to apply and get that grant. I know we can't apply for any grants ahead of time, but I'm just curious, what the potential buffer is if we were to apply for and receive all of the potential grants that are out there.
Yeah, Dr. Cabley, that's a good point. And our ears are up to what grants have been utilized by other school districts. I know Mr. Miller is working hard on assessing that. And there's other opportunities that always pop up through state grants that currently don't exist. So yes, that would definitely positively impact that. And we would absolutely be looking out for any additional grants to help offset that.
But I think it would be helpful, like if there's any that you already know of that, say there's one for $200,000 that's out there, if you could start compiling a list of ones that are current so that we at least have like a running list of I know we won't know all of them and that things pop up as the year goes on, but I'd really like to be able to see, is there anything out there currently that is available and how much is potentially available?
Absolutely. Yes, we absolutely would.
Thank you.
I do know that in the past there have been specific safety grants, $25,000, $45,000 over the past couple of years, and we've utilized those. A lot of those for cameras and some various different smaller safety items, which would also be appropriately used for other various things for in-house security types of things that we could also look at. So yes, that's a really valid point. We would absolutely do that. Yes. Yes.
I do.
Yes.
Betsy Stone, skip back. All right, I was a little confused by what you were saying to Ms. Brockett. So we had the 400,000 that we're not using for outside security services on the one sheet. Is that what we're currently paying for our security? No.
So our total security package that has been presented in previous meetings is about $525,000, specific to our current contract provider of APC. The school board, we added 8 positions. They were not in the budget for the current security people that work, and they are PVSD employees.
So we currently have 8 security.
We do.
We currently have 8 staff security that are on staff, and the budget is calling for an additional 8. So the 1.4, you're looking at half of that, like 700,000 is the additional 8, roughly speaking.
Give or take, and a lot of those items are pure ads. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds, but they are pure ads because those are brand new salary dollars that would be subject to like PSERs at 34%.
Right.
So if it's an existing employee and we give that employee a raise, the 34% applies to the new money, but it doesn't apply to the old money. Right. So it's a pure ad.
So it's basically roughly so you had it on a second slide. You had that the benefits and the taxes and PSERs and stuff was an additional amount, but that was mixed in with the rest. What are we looking at as the total ad for next year? Like, what's the full? So yeah, because we have FICA, we have all that, you know. So like, if we're saying, I mean, we have 1.4 for the 16 new positions, but we actually already have 8 currently in this year's budget that we're using. What are we looking at the total ad for next year's budget, if that makes sense?
So it says all 16 new positions because I have to recognize in the budget all 16 positions in next year's budget.
Okay, so the 8 are just
Well, that's
extra.
not
Okay,
accurate.
now I understand.
But that's not accurate. The 1.4 is not just for 8 new people.
It's for 16.
It's for 16.
No, it's not. It includes other items, does it not?
On the next slide, it had the additional, the
Right now, it's the total program for 16 new positions is $1.4 million.
Where is the budget item for the accessories that come with that?
the next slide, I think is what it's on.
So,
FICA's in there.
No, the
Oh.
accessories that come with it.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that not part of the 1.4?
So the 1.4 is the whole package.
Correct. That's what I was saying.
Yes.
And the whole package includes accessories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Because we haven't determined that next step. So that 1.4
So it's not
is
just salaries. It's
correct.
it's salaries plus. Is that, am I understanding
Yep.
that correctly? Okay.
Yep.
I think that answers it.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Oh, yeah. I'm here already, thanks. Robert Liggett. So doing that math then, it looks like we're looking at about 87.5 per person. Am I approximately correct there? It's taking 700,000, dividing it by 8.
Well, so yeah, because if it's salaries and benefits, yeah.
Okay.
Because each new dollar adds about 60 cents in benefits.
No,
When
that's
you
not,
include
that's not,
insurance.
that's
Now,
not
is
accurate.
this for the security being, let's say, the exact same kind of security that we currently have, meaning that they're not an SRO, they're not an SPO. This is for just straight security. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
This is just straight security because we haven't determined anything else.
So if we were to change the type of security, this number goes up. Is that correct?
It depends on how many people are added in next year's budget.
But not just number of people, but what their job description would be. Because if we go to hire SPOs, typically they come in at a much larger salary than a straight security officer. And these numbers do not reflect that. These are reflecting only straight security like we have currently.
So that would be correct.
Well, I want to jump in there with what Mr. Liggett's saying and what Mr. Saylor had said. That 1.4 million is people plus accessories. So that means training, that means equipment, that means possible vehicles. Like that number honestly could go down if we don't accept what the proposal is that we're going to hear tomorrow night. So I just feel like the community needs to know that that 1.4 million is right now everything, because you have to budget on the what ifs. But if we vote no, then you would have to go back in and adjust the budget accordingly. Am I correct?
That's correct.
You can't take the 1.4 or the 800 and divide it by 8 and say the average aggregate per person is 89,000 because it includes utilities.
Well, and I understand that. In utilities, we need to make sure that we define what those utilities and accessories are. Whether it's adding vehicles, adding weapons, adding whatever it is. Just calling them accessories, I think, is not fully informative. Hopefully, we will get more into that tomorrow night.
So, and Mr. Liggett, I think you're accurate in that we need to have more detailed information. But right now, because nothing has actually been formally proposed, that information is not there. Like, I don't even know how much money is going towards, say, cars or training. So I think that you're right. Before anything can actually move forward, everybody, public, board, everyone needs to be more informed as to what the costs are. But I think we're not there yet. The first step is the meeting tomorrow night, and I do encourage everybody to go or to tune into that meeting so that some of this makes a little bit more sense, and then hopefully as we move forward, it'll continue to make more sense.
So I think what we're struggling with is what we struggle with all the time when we create a budget, right? We have an idea and we're out there, and so my job is to make sure conservatively I try to protect the budget. And I know that the school board understands the process there. We have tried to encapsulate where we think we might go with those 16 positions, and it's inclusive as far as we know it and as far as we make it. If we change those dynamics, then that will change that $1.4 million figure. Okay, any other questions?
Excuse me, so are you saying that could go up from 1.4 million, that number could increase? Is that what you're saying, or you're saying it could decrease?
So right now it's just a number to address the 16 positions and accessories as far as what we created, what I am envisioning it to be next year. My guess is that it will probably be adjusted in some way, shape, or form after it is determined what the total number of positions will be and what type of security they will be moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so fund balance conversation, bringing it back up. I don't think there's much question in the way of the conversation piece around the debt service and the PSERS reserve. I think from a board perspective, we're all in agreement that that's part of our normal process, has been part of our normal process, and should continue to be part of our normal process. So I would move forward with the 250 and the 301 like I did last month. And there's a separate motion for us to approve that. Any questions on that particular part of it from the school board? Okay, now, as far as COVID reserve goes, last month I came forward and I suggested and recommended that we utilize the entire remaining amount of COVID reserve. There was discussion that was brought up, and we thought about that, and Mrs. Hurd and I put our heads together, and we kind of agreed with that, where we decided to, where that conversation kind of went. So we are recommending to utilize $500,000 of COVID reserve. That would leave us with a balance of $371,000. And if we move forward with those recommendations, that would equate to about 0.84% of our general fund budgeted expenditures as presented tonight. And so I would recommend those three reservations to get those done and off the table and move forward with our budget process. Remember, we can always change those if the board so desires, but right now to get it on the record to move forward and officially do that. Doing so, oh yeah, yes.
And, can you remind me, is there a date that we have to use up the COVID reserve by?
No, remember when we created the COVID reserve, or it was created for us because we shut down in March of 2020. That was our own money that we set aside based upon the savings mostly specific to the savings in the bus transportation.
That's what I thought. So
Yes.
we don't necessarily have to rush and use 500,000. We could use even less if that was something we decided to do.
I would, seeing the 6% out there, I would really recommend that we would go with the 500,000. I was really debating, and I came forward last month with the 871, and I think doing the 500,000 actually helps us in our journey towards getting a budget that's in good position, but also reserve some of those monies that was talked about for future incidences still associated with the uses of and the impacts of the pandemic.
Well, I guess my concern with that is, again, we've been talking about this 1.4 million, and we have a meeting tomorrow, and I'm not really sure where we're going. And so to approve the use of 500,000 now with not knowing what that 1.4 million is actually going to look like seems a little premature to me.
So if I could kind of look at that a different way, very, very good point. If I could look at that a different way, if we approve the recommendations in there, we're still at a 5.41%. So we, as a board and administration, still have a lot of work to do to either recognize additional revenues, reduce expenditures, or utilize other avenues, other unassigned fund balances to get us even to our first goal, which is the 4.1%. We still have to figure out a little over $1 million just to get us to our 4.1%. So it's getting tight.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
But legitimate, absolutely legitimate. Any other questions from the school board on those three recommendations? Again, passing those would get us to a 5.41%, a little bit closer. Any questions from the community? Okay. And those would be on for 5.05 and 5.06. Okay, so just to remember, the state budget presentation is tomorrow night. We continue to watch for interest rate hikes, not necessarily for expenditures, but more so for revenues. And there's at least one additional interest rate hike that is being planned that I am aware of. We'll continue to review the revenues and expenditures for 23-24. That process never really stops. And remember, we have the unassigned fund balance, which will come from our recommendation, and we'll work together on this. The projection that comes next month on how we're doing for the 22-23 year. Remember, that will drive what we feel will be available in our projection for the unassigned fund balance for use for next year. Any questions on that? Any questions from the community? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. 5.02 is a placeholder. 5.03, 04, 05, and 06 were discussed. If there's no additional or questions, then I would suggest we move those to consent. 5.07 is the approval of the 23-24 holidays for 12-month employees. Can I move that to consent? Approval of 23-24 school board meeting dates, 5.05. Move to consent. 5.09, approval of 22-23 special education contracts and cost of services. Move to consent. And 5.10, the approval of exceptions to board policy 810. That was discussed earlier. Move to consent.
Mr. Fountain, I believe there was a request by Dr. Russell to vote on that tonight. Would you be comfortable?
Was there a request to vote? Okay.
There was a request, so I would appreciate that if the board would consider taking action this evening. That would be great.
Is there any additional information?
Well, hold on. You have to make a motion.
Just make a motion? All right. Make a motion to approve the exception to board policy 810.
Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion?
Could I ask, how do you do this in the middle of the year with the students? I mean, the questionnaire, you're able to contact those students. It wasn't anonymous or anything, and they want to be contacted and updated and to get the rides. And what about the other parents that didn't respond, that were like, oh, we never knew we could get a ride? And then you have 20 more kids that say, oh, we want to get on that bus. And then is there room?
Great questions, and yes. We do have room to accommodate all 100 students roughly from Evergreen on buses that currently run. And this STA will route maybe potentially 2 buses through the development, maybe 3, as they spread those students out. And we will contact the parents and ask them to commit. Your child's either going to be a bus rider or your child's going to stay a walker. Because we don't really want them flip-flopping. That's difficult for our schools to keep track of, so they have to commit. Just like now, I'm either a bus rider or I'm a walker. Same thing. I'm walking. Yep. Well, and sometimes we have to pick up our children early to go to the doctors, and we let the office know, so those exceptions. But right now, that's what we're going out with, and the students will also be offered an opportunity to practice riding a bus. Some of them have never really ridden a bus, except maybe for a field trip. That's planned by the principal, along with that communication. So we will afford all students an opportunity to ride the bus, but anticipate about 32, 35 will take it.
And how do we do this and minimize any learning loss or impact to the school day for these students? Because it seems like we're doing some orientation stuff, you know, in the middle of the year.
Right. So the idea would be, as students get dropped off at 8:30, to run out with some walkers on a bus, just to give them a practice run, getting on the bus, getting off the bus. This is the rear exit door. This is how we sit on a bus. You know, it will take maybe up to 30 minutes. They'll take a quick little ride and get a sense of where a bus stop might be, and just climbing up the steps for the first time and coming down the steps. So the principal has that planned out now at this point, and feels as if we can get the students to where they need to be with really little time away from what's happening in class.
Any other discussions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
5.11 is simply a report on grants and donations.
And so ends your section. Thank you very much, Mr. Fountain. Payment of bills, Mr. Keenan.
We've got payment of bills 6.01 next week, March 13th. We'll have move that to consent.
It's just both for next week.
6.02 is also taking place next week.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Mayers, professional personnel.
Thank you. 7.01 is on consent. 7.02 is going to be a motion to approve a separation and release agreement. I don't know if anybody has any questions or discussion. If not, 7.03 through 7.09 are all on consent. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Oh, wait, sorry. Can I move 702 to?
You wanna
okay,
do 702
thank you.
tonight?
Yep, please move 702 to consent. And that ends my section.
Thank you very much. Support personnel, Mr. Dorr.
Line time sections on consent.
Thank you very much. Governance, Dr. Kolar.
Item 9.01 will be a second reading of the policies listed below and adoption of those policies. Any questions or comments, or can we move to consent? Okay, we'll move 9.01 to consent. Item 9.02 will be the designation of an open records officer, Mr. Ganesh. Any comments, questions, or can we move to consent? All right, that ends my section.
Thank you very much. Comments from the audience?
I have a question in reference to this MCIU meeting thing. What is what goes on at these MCIU meetings that the board members have to attend? If I may ask.
So you're aware of what the Montgomery County
Oh yeah, I know what the MCIU is.
Right. So every district has a board representative
Okay.
who serves on the board of the MCIU, because the MCIU serves the entire county.
Right.
So we approve, the board member from each of our districts has to approve all of these same things like we do in a board meeting here.
They're very
So
similar
any
to this board
policy,
meeting.
Okay. I just wanted to know
it is a board meeting, and so everything that the MCIU does has to be approved by district board members.
Okay. I just wanted to know.
Any other discussions by any members of the public? Okay, seeing none. Comments from any board members? Mr. Dorr?
So two things. I'm glad to hear the administration's looking into the books. That's probably the single biggest issue I'm hearing from parents. I'm glad it's being addressed. I do think this policy should go to policy and be discussed. Second thing is, I love spirited debate. I have no problem with it, but I think we all need to try and be a little more professional when we talk to one another. I think it sets a really bad example to the community when we're yelling at each other. So just food for thought.
So I attended the East production of Matilda on Friday night, and I just want to say it was an absolutely amazing performance by all of the students. And Mr. Schaefer mentioned Mean Girls coming up, but this weekend is West's production of Willy Wonka Jr. So our students are so talented, so please head out to see them. And Mr. Dorr, I couldn't agree more, but I think the respect needs to start by including board members in information prior to it coming to a board meeting. That's always been how we've addressed things, is that it's a no surprise rule. So when we get hit with these things like that, it leaves me speechless and shaking and so angry. So if I had the information ahead of time, I could certainly get my thoughts together more appropriately and be more respectful in conversations.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Dorr said as well, that I agree. We do need to treat each other with respect and speak respectfully, but, you know, that we were blindsided tonight, and I'm really disappointed that it played out the way it did, but unfortunately, I think if we're going to work together, then there needs to be common courtesy of letting people know what's going on. And I've said this for over a year now, that I feel like time after time, these decisions and these things come out of nowhere without consensus or even just kind of a heads up. And so I think what happened today was just really genuine and real, because many of us felt blindsided and like this came out of left field, and that's not the way I want us to be working together. I want us to be having discussions and knowing what we're talking about and having time to prepare and be thoughtful in our words, and we weren't given that opportunity today.
So as a board member, I have come to the policy meetings. I can't interact in the policy meetings because of the Sunshine Law. And I've listened. I myself have challenged a book. I've listened to the book discussion in the policy meetings. And we need to have this conversation, and it needs to be moved forward in an expedited way. I believe because we as a school district have materials available that are, you can't let minors read them. I mean, they're how-to manuals, pretty much, some of them, they're just very explicit. And I just don't support that. And I know there are people in our community that don't support that. And I know we have a policy, an AR, you can go through and you can disagree and have the committee look at it, but I'm extremely concerned with some of the, and disagree with some of the committee assignments. So I look forward to having this discussion. It'll be in policy, then it'll come back to the board. I do look forward to having that discussion. And I agree with all of you that we need to continue to work on just having hard conversations. That's just the nature of being on a board, representing a diverse community. I think it's a good thing to have hard conversations, but to be respectful and to try to hear what the other is saying, even if we don't necessarily agree. So, thank you.
Dr. Campley?
So I just want to reiterate what both Dr. Kolar and Mrs. Evan Brockett said, in that in order to have these conversations, there needs to be transparency and there needs to be, you know, the heads up. You can't blindside people and throw things down from a position of what is deemed as a powerful position by some, to think that they can do and say things when it fits their narrative, but yet would never allow that if it didn't fit their narrative. And, you know, the transparency piece is key. I'm really happy in the world of transparency with the fact that there's going to be a presentation for tomorrow evening, and that there was some conversation already regarding some questions with the community around that. And the same thing needs to be afforded, not just when it comes to whether or not we add changes to the security that we have in our schools, but also when we discuss what is in our libraries. And that needs to be happening in a transparent manner, and policies cannot be put in place via a sneak attack.
Any other discussions? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Saylor. Thank you to the board for your approval of the exception to policy 810. I do appreciate that. And I wanted to make a note for the record. Tomorrow evening's community conversation will be live streamed, so we'll have that set up for individuals who are interested in hearing more about some of what we're thinking but cannot attend. So we'll have that option. Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, 10.03, notice of video recording disclaimer. Note that the board had an executive session today for the purpose of personnel and legal, and I will rule adjournment.